Hello and welcome back to Kookaburra, where knowledge meets inner wisdom. Today, we are going to continue our journey into the fascinating subject of reincarnation. In the first part, we ended with the idea that after physical death, the soul leaves the body and returns to what many spiritual traditions describe as the astral or non-physical dimension. According to this model, this is where the soul reconnects with what we might call its spiritual family, a group of souls whose energetic nature is closely compatible with its own. Because of this similarity, there can be a very deep level of understanding and cooperation between them. You could think of this group almost as a reincarnation team. Across different lifetimes, members of this group may take on different roles in one another's lives. In one incarnation, one soul may play the role of your father. In another lifetime, that same soul may appear as your child, your partner, your friend, or perhaps even someone who challenges you. The particular role depends upon the experiences each soul wishes to explore. After returning to this non-physical state, many spiritual traditions and near-death accounts describe something often called a life review. The important point is that this review is not a judgment. Nobody is sitting there with a big book deciding whether you have been good or bad. Instead, you review your experiences. You see what you learned, what you did not learn, how your decisions affected other people, and what knowledge you gained during that lifetime. And this evaluation becomes important when planning another incarnation. So how might such planning actually work? Let us imagine that after reviewing your previous life, you decide that you would like to incarnate again. Now comes the process of selecting the experiences you wish to explore. For demonstration purposes, let us keep this very simple. Imagine that your primary experience in the next lifetime is to experience deep, intimate, and unconditional love. As a secondary experience, perhaps you want to learn determination and persistence. Third, you want to develop independence and self-reliance. And fourth, you want to learn greater kindness and consideration toward other people. Obviously, what I am describing here is enormously simplified, because it would be infinitely more complex than anything we could explain in a short video. But this simple model allows us to understand the basic idea. We have spoken before about vibration and frequency, and about the spiritual idea that consciousness itself may exist at different levels of vibration. We have also discussed the idea that the individual soul could be understood as a fragment or expression of a greater creative consciousness. Within that spiritual framework, every incarnation becomes an opportunity for growth. Every experience adds something. Every lesson expands awareness, and through that process, consciousness evolves. Now let us return to our imaginary lifetime. You have chosen deep and intimate love as your primary experience. Such an experience would require you to develop emotionally and spiritually before you were capable of creating that kind of relationship. You could think of it as resonance. Let us use completely illustrative numbers. Suppose the experience you seek represents a frequency of 540 units. To come into resonance with a partner capable of sharing such an experience, perhaps you yourself need to reach something approaching that level. Again, please do not take these numbers as literal scientific measurements. They are simply a way of illustrating the principle. You cannot normally sustain a relationship that exists far beyond your own emotional capacity. So, throughout your life, step by step, different people and different experiences prepare you for that primary goal. And this is where the concept of life planning, or destiny, becomes very interesting. If your main purpose in this incarnation is to experience a very deep form of love, then you need people and circumstances in your life that will help you develop the qualities necessary to experience it. Remember, according to this model, all of this planning occurs before you have a physical body. And because in every incarnation we are both students and teachers, choosing the other people involved becomes extremely important. Imagine casting actors for a theater production. First, you select the souls who will play your parents, then perhaps your brothers and sisters, then close friends, teachers, partners, colleagues, and acquaintances. Eventually, this network could extend even to someone you meet only once for 5 minutes. Yet whose words change the direction of your life? You would also select the circumstances of your birth. For example, let us imagine that in this incarnation you will be born as a girl in Melbourne. Within this spiritual model, even the general circumstances surrounding your departure from this life may form part of the larger plan. Now we come to the main actor in our story, the person who will help you experience your primary lesson of deep love. Perhaps that soul has selected a similar objective, although love may not necessarily be his primary lesson. He decides to incarnate as a man in Brisbane. Suddenly, your life begins to resemble a journey from Melbourne to Brisbane. Between the two of you, you agree upon certain experiences you will share. Some may be beautiful, some may be painful, but all of them become part of your mutual development. In other words, the relationship becomes a co-creation. And according to this model, the same principle applies to many of the important relationships and experiences in our lives. Because your future partner is metaphorically waiting somewhere near Brisbane, the other lessons of your life can be strategically placed along the road leading there. Perhaps someone incarnating in Sydney helps you learn persistence and determination. At the same time, your interaction with that person helps them learn one of their own lessons. Another person living near Coffs Harbour may help you learn compassion and kindness, and you, in return, contribute something important to their development. In this way, our lives become interconnected. We depend upon one another far more than we usually realize. And this brings us to one of the most important ideas in this entire presentation. Life is co-creation. Within this spiritual philosophy, almost everything we experience involves co-creation. Some encounters may be part of a larger life plan. Others may arise from the decisions, circumstances, and patterns we create during life itself. But either way, our lives constantly intersect with the lives of others. If you truly begin looking at life through this perspective, it can dramatically change the way you think about blame, resentment, and forgiveness. Instead of immediately asking, "Who is responsible for what happened to me?" you begin asking, "What can I learn from what happened?" Now someone might say, "That sounds very nice, Joseph, but yesterday some bloke nearly killed me in a nightclub. I don't even know the guy. Surely you're not telling me I planned that." And that is a fair question. We should never use spiritual philosophy to excuse violence, abuse, or criminal behavior. People remain responsible for their actions. But from a spiritual perspective, we can still examine why certain situations appear in our lives, what choices placed us there, how we responded, and what we can learn from the experience. That does not remove another person's responsibility. It simply prevents us from surrendering all of our power to them. We have discussed similar ideas in previous videos, so let us return to the subject of our life path. If we imagine that we carefully planned many important aspects of our incarnation, then remaining reasonably close to that path becomes important. Other people may also depend upon us arriving at certain places at certain times. The importance of timing and destiny was illustrated beautifully in the movie The Adjustment Bureau. If you have never seen it, I highly recommend it. Everything may have been carefully arranged, and then something happens. You are born into the world, and guess what? You forget everything. You do not remember any plan. You do not remember the agreements. You do not remember your purpose. And to make things even more interesting, during childhood, you automatically absorb many of the beliefs, fears, and attitudes of your parents and your surrounding culture. Within many reincarnation traditions, this amnesia is considered intentional. If we remembered every previous incarnation clearly, our new lifetime could become heavily influenced by the previous one. Instead, each life begins with a largely clean slate, and so we struggle through childhood and adolescence equipped mostly with the psychological tools we inherited from our family. Nobody hands us an instruction manual entitled "How to Live Your Life." Childhood disappears remarkably quickly. Suddenly you are an adult. Your whole life lies in front of you, and you have absolutely no idea what you are supposed to do with it. Fortunately, although we may not have received an instruction manual, I believe we were given something else: intuition. Intuition can act as our compass. Unfortunately, modern society strongly emphasizes analytical thinking while often dismissing intuition. Logic is extremely useful. I am certainly not suggesting that we abandon it. But logic and intuition perform different functions. Logic works mainly with information we already possess. Intuition sometimes seems to point toward information we cannot yet explain. But intuition does not always work clearly from the beginning. The signal may be there, but we often cannot recognize it because our mind is full of thoughts, fears, expectations, and old beliefs. All of this creates noise that can easily drown out the quiet voice of intuition. And intuition needs practice. The more we learn to quiet the mind and pay attention to these subtle inner signals, the easier they become to recognize. I like to think of intuition as a muscle of consciousness. The more you use it, the stronger and more reliable it becomes. Just as you go to a gym to develop your physical body, you can train your inner awareness. And meditation, in my experience, is one of the most effective tools for doing that. Developing your intuition may become one of the most valuable investments you ever make. And the beautiful thing is that it costs absolutely nothing. Because of our spiritual amnesia, we may have no conscious awareness that there is a life plan at all. But according to many spiritual traditions, we are not traveling alone. We have guidance. Some people call these beings spirit guides. Others call them guardian angels. You may prefer another term entirely. The terminology is not particularly important. What matters is the idea that guidance may exist beyond our ordinary conscious mind. Obviously, if such beings exist on another level of reality, they cannot simply phone you and say, "Joseph, don't do that." Communication would have to be much more subtle. And I believe intuition, or what some people call the higher self, is one of the channels through which this communication takes place. That is why developing intuition can be so valuable. Intuition does not necessarily show you the whole journey. It may simply guide you toward the next step. A feeling to go somewhere, speak to someone, take an opportunity, or perhaps avoid something that does not feel right. In other words, you do not need to see the entire map. You only need enough guidance to take the next step in the right direction. You continue moving along your timeline without necessarily knowing where your destination is. And interestingly, you may not need to know. Using our Melbourne to Brisbane example, you do not necessarily have to follow one exact road. You simply need to continue generally toward Brisbane. You can make detours. You might stop in Sydney. You might fall in love there. You may even marry someone there. Perhaps years later, you discover that the relationship was not your final destination. It does not necessarily mean the relationship was a mistake. Perhaps it contained lessons both of you needed. And if your path continues toward Brisbane, you can keep moving. From this perspective, the quality and ease of life may sometimes provide feedback about how aligned we are with our deeper direction. When we are relatively aligned, life may seem to flow more naturally. When we move far away from ourselves, everything can begin to feel like swimming against the current. This is where intuition becomes particularly important. At first, it may communicate very gently, a feeling, a spontaneous thought, a strange sense that you should call someone, an urge to go somewhere, a feeling that something is right or not right. Sometimes the message appears through another person. Someone casually says something that answers the exact question you have been thinking about. If we repeatedly ignore these signals, life may begin to feel increasingly difficult. When that happens, I recommend stopping. Look at your life. Look at your choices. Ask yourself, am I moving toward the person I really want to become? Does this life still feel like mine? Am I constantly forcing something that simply does not fit? These are powerful questions. Some spiritual traditions also interpret difficult physical experiences symbolically. I want to be very clear here. Physical symptoms can have medical causes and should always be properly investigated by qualified healthcare professionals. Spiritual interpretation should never replace medical diagnosis or treatment. But after dealing appropriately with the physical problem, we can still ask whether the experience carries some personal meaning for us. For example, some people symbolically associate problems with movement with feeling stuck in life, or hearing problems with refusing to listen. Whether you believe those interpretations literally or simply use them as tools for self-reflection is entirely up to you. What I find fascinating is the possibility that sometimes life itself creates a powerful interruption when we are moving in completely the wrong direction. And this brings me to a very personal story of my own course correction. In 1970, I was in my final year of compulsory schooling in Czechoslovakia. Like every young person of that age, I had to answer a very difficult question. What am I going to do with my life? At that time, of course, I knew absolutely nothing about destiny, intuition, higher self, or spiritual guidance. The automobile industry in Czechoslovakia was expanding rapidly, and my father persuaded me to become a motor mechanic. He had a friend who worked as a manager at Dobrostov in Bratislava. Through him, my father arranged an apprenticeship for me. I was supposed to begin on the 1st of September. At that time, it was quite common for school leavers to take temporary summer jobs and earn some money before beginning their apprenticeship. So I took a summer job at Dobrostov. I thought it would also give me an opportunity to become familiar with the place where I expected to spend the next 3 years. I lasted 3 days. On the 3rd day, I suffered a serious workplace accident. We were transporting a gearbox from a mobile crane using an overhead workshop crane. The gearbox had not been secured properly. It fell, and it landed on my right hand. 3 of my fingers were almost severed. At the hospital, the surgeons reattached them as best they could, but the damage was so severe that nobody initially knew whether the fingers could be saved. The 1st of September arrived. I was supposed to begin my apprenticeship. My hand was still in plaster. But the tendons and nerves had been badly damaged, and I could not move them properly. And once again, after only 3 days, I was released from the apprenticeship. It had become obvious that becoming a motor mechanic was no longer realistic. There is something else that I find interesting. The number 3. 3 days at the summer job, 3 days at the apprenticeship, and later, 3 reconstructive operations on my hand. I have also had 3 completely different careers throughout my life, and I built 3 homes from the ground up, 1 in Slovakia and 2 here in Australia. Whether you interpret that numerologically, spiritually, psychologically, or simply as coincidence is entirely your decision. But for me personally, the accident became one of the greatest course corrections of my life. Because I could no longer become a motor mechanic, I eventually trained as a photographer. Photography was already a hobby of mine, so it felt like a natural choice. And entering the world of photographers exposed me to people who saw life very differently from the worldview I had inherited from my parents and from socialist Czechoslovakia. Eventually, my life brought me to Australia. And Australia opened doors to knowledge, experiences, and spiritual ideas that would have been extremely difficult for me to encounter in the Czechoslovakia of that period. That accident was extremely painful. I underwent 3 reconstructive operations. My hand never regained 100% functionality. But strangely enough, today I am grateful for what happened, because that painful event changed the direction of my entire life. Had it not happened, perhaps I would have spent my life repairing cars. Instead, I became a photographer. Later, I entered completely different areas of work and personal development. Eventually, I found the knowledge I am sharing with you today. So, was the accident simply bad luck? Was it a statistical accident? Was it a spiritual correction? I cannot prove the answer, but after looking back across more than half a century, I know what it means to me. And I believe it redirected my life. I also want to make something clear. I do not believe I consciously ignored my intuition. At that age, I did not even know that intuition could be used in this way. Perhaps there were smaller signals, perhaps there were not. I simply did not have the awareness to recognize them. Let us return to our imaginary journey. You started correctly toward Brisbane, but somewhere near Wagga Wagga, for whatever reason, you decide to turn toward Adelaide instead. At first, perhaps nothing dramatic happens. You simply experience a strange feeling. Something feels wrong. You cannot explain it logically, but the feeling remains. If you repeatedly ignore that inner feedback and continue forcing yourself further in the wrong direction, the psychological pressure may increase. Stress increases, frustration increases. Your relationships may deteriorate. Your body may eventually begin carrying that stress as well. Again, physical illness should always be medically evaluated. But at the same time, major physical or emotional difficulties can become powerful opportunities to stop and reassess our lives. Pain gets our attention remarkably effectively. Unfortunately, most people have never been taught to examine these experiences in a broader context. And that is one reason I believe knowledge of this kind is valuable. Not because it gives us all the answers, but because it encourages us to ask better questions. Instead of simply asking, "How do I make this pain disappear?" we might also ask, "What is happening in my life? What needs to change? What am I refusing to acknowledge? What direction am I traveling?" Within the reincarnation model we have been exploring, there could theoretically come a point where a particular planned experience can no longer occur during the remaining lifetime. Using our metaphor, you have traveled so far away from Brisbane that reaching it within the available time becomes impossible. Some spiritual teachings interpret an early death or major life interruption through ideas like these. There are also rare experiences in which people come extremely close to death, leave their normal waking awareness, and return profoundly changed. We call these near-death experiences. Many people who report them say that after returning, their priorities, values, and entire understanding of life changed dramatically. It can almost resemble being given a second chance. I mentioned earlier that intuition is like a muscle, and muscles need training. If you walk into a gym for the first time, you do not expect to immediately lift 100 kilograms. The same applies here. Do not expect to sit down for your first meditation and suddenly begin having complete conversations with your higher self. It is more like a child learning to walk. 2 or 3 steps, then bang, straight onto the backside. What matters is getting up and trying again. And let us be clear about what I mean by intuition and communication with the higher self. I am not talking about some dramatic theatrical performance. I am not suggesting that everybody needs to become a channel or hear mysterious voices. I see the higher self much more simply. Think of it as the clearest, deepest aspect of you, the part not dominated by fear, ego, social programming, and emotional noise. You could think of it as an interface between your everyday personality and a deeper level of consciousness. So, how can we begin developing communication with it? Step 1. Make the decision. The first step is very simple. Decide that you want a stronger relationship with your intuition and higher self. Intention matters. Within many spiritual traditions, free will is considered fundamental. Guidance may be available, but active cooperation begins when we consciously invite it. If you already meditate, then when you are deeply relaxed, you might quietly repeat an intention 3 times. There is no magical mantra. It could simply be, "I am ready and willing to develop clear communication with my higher self." You do not have to say it aloud. You can say it silently. Personally, however, I find that speaking an intention aloud can sometimes make it feel more definite and committed. If you do not meditate yet, you can do the same thing while lying in bed at night, when you are relaxed and somewhere between wakefulness and sleep. Step 2. Develop awareness. The second step is learning to observe. Become more aware of what is happening around you. And equally importantly, observe what is happening inside your own mind. Notice your thoughts. Notice your emotional reactions. Notice repeated patterns. Notice those quiet feelings that appear before your analytical mind begins explaining everything away. This skill is essential. It is extremely difficult to hear subtle inner guidance when every second of your attention is buried in a mobile phone, television, social media, or constant mental noise. Step 3. Consistency. The third step is regular practice. Consistency is absolutely essential. By practicing regularly, you train your attention. You also demonstrate to yourself that this is important. You are creating a new psychological and spiritual habit. This is usually where people begin producing excuses. I would love to meditate, but I don't have time. My house is never quiet. My family keeps interrupting me. I understand, but everybody receives the same 24 hours each day. We somehow find time for the things we consider important. So either find the time or create it. If necessary, get up half an hour earlier. Another objection I hear constantly is, I cannot meditate. My thoughts are racing through my head at 1,000 kilometers an hour. That is perfectly normal. You do not have to begin with traditional meditation. Start with relaxation. One of the simplest methods I know is simply listening to calm music. For example, Tibetan singing bowls or other slow meditative soundscapes. There are many recordings available online. Use headphones if possible. Find somewhere comfortable, close your eyes, and listen. Do not try to achieve anything. Do not fight your thoughts. Do not attempt to empty your mind. Just listen. Even if the recording lasts 2 hours, you certainly do not need to listen to the whole thing. Start with 10 minutes. Later, if you enjoy it, increase the time. And if you fall asleep, that is not a disaster. At the beginning, one of the most important things is teaching your body how to relax. A chronically tense body makes subtle awareness much more difficult. Regular relaxation practices can also help reduce perceived stress and may support better overall well-being. The key is consistency. Make it part of your routine. For many people, doing something purely for themselves feels strangely difficult. We are constantly doing things for partners, children, parents, employers, and everybody else. Then we say, I don't have time for myself. The easiest solution I have found is to make the practice part of your routine. For example, at 7 o'clock every morning I meditate. Once you repeat something consistently, you no longer need to negotiate with yourself every day. It becomes part of your life. Later, when your concentration and self-discipline improve, you can move toward more advanced meditation. You begin by slowing thoughts, then observing them, then allowing them to pass without following them. Eventually, you may experience moments of profound inner silence. The communication channel becomes clearer because it is no longer filled with constant mental chatter. After some time, you may notice something interesting. Your perception of your own life begins to change. You sometimes feel almost like an observer of your own thoughts and behavior. Do not misunderstand this. I am not talking about pathological detachment from reality. I am describing the ordinary meditative experience of becoming less automatically identified with every thought produced by the ego. Instead of immediately reacting, you begin observing. And that small difference can completely change your life. Using a pendulum. Another practical method some people use when exploring intuition is a pendulum. This is a much more hands-on approach. The limitation is that communication is normally reduced to simple yes or no responses. Therefore, you need to formulate your questions carefully so that they can genuinely be answered with yes or no. If you are interested in exploring that method, I have another video explaining how to work with a pendulum correctly. You will find it here on the Kookaburra channel. Are you a victim or a survivor? Now we arrive at another extremely important point. Very few people realize how much our attitude toward an experience influences what that experience eventually becomes. We may not choose every event that happens to us, And we certainly should not blame people for being victims of violence, accidents, or circumstances outside their control. But we do have influence over what happens next. Two people can experience similar difficulties and build completely different lives afterward. One question can be particularly powerful. What can I do with this experience now? Within the spiritual model we have been discussing, even painful experiences may have a role in our development. And naturally, someone may ask, why would anybody choose a negative experience? That brings us to the idea of duality. We live in a world of contrasts, light and darkness, hot and cold, pleasure and pain, love and hatred, success and failure, connection and loneliness. Our ability to recognize and appreciate an experience often depends upon having a reference point. Imagine never experiencing darkness. Would the word light have the same meaning? Imagine never experiencing loneliness. Would companionship feel the same? Imagine never experiencing disappointment in relationships. Would you recognize extraordinary love when it finally appeared? Contrast gives experience definition. This does not mean we need to deliberately create suffering. It simply means that difficult experiences can teach us something that comfort cannot. If our imaginary soul wants to experience extraordinary love, perhaps earlier disappointments provide a reference point. They teach discernment. They teach boundaries. They teach emotional maturity. They teach us what love is not. And perhaps because of those lessons, when genuine love eventually arrives, we are capable of recognizing and appreciating it. The problem is that when we do not understand what our difficult experiences are teaching us, we can very easily fall into self-pity. We begin asking, why did this happen to me? Sometimes a more useful question is, what is this experience showing me? What am I learning? What must change? What strength is this forcing me to develop? That shift does not magically remove the pain, but it can transform the meaning of the pain. Physical pain, emotional pain, and suffering. To understand pain better, I find it useful to divide it into different categories. First, physical pain. Physical pain is an alarm system. If you break your leg, pain tells you something is wrong. Pay attention, get help. That is an extremely useful biological function. Then there is emotional pain. Emotional pain can also carry information. It tells us that something deeply important has happened. Perhaps we have lost someone. Perhaps a relationship has ended. Perhaps our identity has been challenged. Perhaps our values have been violated. Perhaps the life we are living no longer fits who we have become. And then there is another phenomenon: suffering. Pain and suffering are not always the same thing. Pain may arise naturally from an event. Suffering can continue long after the event because our mind keeps recreating the story. The ego creates an expectation. This person should love me. My life should look like this. This opportunity must happen. This relationship must last forever. Reality then develops differently, and the mind repeatedly returns to the difference between what happened and what we wanted to happen. Why? The mental loop keeps feeding itself. One of the most effective ways I have found to interrupt this process is to recognize the difference between reality and expectation. The imagined future was created by the mind. Reality chose another direction. That does not automatically mean the new direction will be worse. Sometimes what initially looks like disaster becomes the event that redirects your entire life. Believe me, friends, I have personally experienced this more than once. Attitude changes everything. Regardless of what situation we find ourselves in, our attitude toward it is crucial. We always have some choice regarding what happens next. We can remain permanently focused on blame, or we can eventually ask what the experience can teach us. When we choose the second approach, we regain some influence over our own life. We extract knowledge from the experience. We develop emotional strength. And perhaps the next time we encounter a similar situation, we deal with it very differently. If everything is always somebody else's fault, there is a serious problem. We give away our power. Because if another person is completely responsible for the state of my inner world, then I have to wait for that person to change before I can become free. I do not want to live like that. My mother used to tell me something when I was young. Son, everything bad that happens to you eventually brings something good with it. I carried that saying with me throughout my entire life, and remarkably, she was right. Sometimes it took months, sometimes years, occasionally many years. But eventually, I could almost always see something valuable that grew from experiences I originally considered purely negative. And believe me, I have had plenty of them. Every experience, positive or negative, can contain some form of wisdom. Our responsibility is to find it. Life is an enormous school, and strangely enough, we are students and teachers at the same time. Sometimes we teach through kindness, sometimes through love, sometimes through mistakes, and sometimes another person's difficult behavior becomes the experience that forces us to discover strength we never knew we possessed. When you truly understand this principle, an enormous emotional weight can disappear. You may eventually look back at even some of the most difficult people you have encountered and realize, that experience changed me. That person taught me boundaries. That betrayal taught me self-respect. That loss taught me independence. That disappointment redirected my life. This does not mean that harmful behavior suddenly becomes acceptable. It means you refuse to allow that behavior to control the rest of your life. You take the lesson, you keep the wisdom, and you continue your journey. Perhaps that is one of the deepest purposes of incarnation itself, to experience, to learn, to grow, and then to carry that expanded awareness forward. My friends, that brings us to the end of today's presentation. Thank you very much for spending this time with me. I hope this video has given you something to think about and perhaps helped you look at your own life from a slightly different perspective. If you found this information valuable, please give the video a like and share it with someone who may also benefit from it. And if you would like to continue exploring consciousness, reincarnation, intuition, and the deeper nature of reality with me, subscribe to Kookaburra. Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay open-minded, and keep listening to that quiet voice within.